Boom. Oops, I didn't say something about this video.
Okay.
Okay, it's loading.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, I think we should be live. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, hi Nora. We're
Hi.
live. Thanks for doing this. Uh, I still have a white belt in podcasting. I'm sure you probably have a black belt.
Oh my God.
But like I told you, I on this podcast we just chat and wherever the muses take us to, by
That's
the
where.
inspiration, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's where we land and just chat, hoping that we can share knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
learn from each other, and
That's
also contribute to what the world's knowledge, even if a contribution is a grain of salt. Yeah, so that's that about this. So we are live. I would like to know more about you. That's a broad question, but how much you can tell us, and we'll take it from there.
Well, my name is my name is Norah-Frida. First name, got two first names. Norah-Frida Tebid.
Mm-hmm.
I am man, life is so complicated. Like, I mean, I was born in what used to be Cameroon proper.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I mean, it's kind of weird nowadays because then I gotta differentiate and tell people that I'm Southern Cameroonian, which is seceded from the Union, and then it gets into this whole long, elaborate conversation. But basically, I was born in Bamenda,
Okay.
which technically isn't necessarily located in Cameroon proper today. I'm the first of three kids. Um,
Oh,
Obviously
wow.
an immigrant to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a recent graduate out of Salisbury University with a BA in political science and international relations. Like
Okay.
I was telling you before you went
Mm-hmm.
live, I'm passionate about African politics. Definitely learning more about that. I'm
Okay.
passionate about women's issues, specifically Black women. I
Okay.
consider myself an intersectional feminism. I consider myself an intersectional feminist and
Okay.
slash womanist. And I'm looking forward to a future where whatever it is that I'm doing next, or I'm engaging in degree wise,
Mm-hmm.
or just career wise, has something to do with African politics, obviously, and women's role in within that
Okay.
space. So that's kind of the crux of it, I would say.
Wow. Why women? Like
Why
if you
women?
dive, yeah, if you dive in, you say like you're interested in African politics, particularly women,
Hmm.
interested in and then intersectional feminism, and
Hmm.
then womanism, like this women feminism, like what is it? Are you
Oh
like
yeah,
the
yeah, like all those
woman
isms and the
Jesus?
names, like
Mm-hmm.
So I think quite literally, I'm a Black woman, so like my
Mm-hmm.
experiences are gonna be unique to me
Okay.
as a Black woman. I think, you know, even as somebody who claimed themselves to be a feminist, I think what I
Mm-hmm.
realized, like pretty early on about the feminist movement is that it tends to exclude Black women and the experiences of Black women. It's not an inclusive, and this is something that, like, when I spoke to Lala, who's my partner in my Banya podcast, when I
Okay.
spoke to Lala about it, I was like, it's like something I noticed really early on, the fact that, like, Black
Mm-hmm.
women, or like POCs, I'm gonna use that term, people of color, women of color, that
Yeah.
umbrella largely excluded from the larger feminist movement. It was mostly white women and white issues, and as a
Yeah.
Black woman and African woman, I can't relate to those issues. And
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty obvious that white feminists really failed in advocating for Black women. And so it was like, when I was like studying some more, like studying other really like cool people, some really dope people out of Africa,
Mm-hmm.
I think that umbrella term of womanist came to fruition, where it was like the liberation of women,
Mm-hmm.
um in all aspects of life, not just the sexual liberation, but just the liberation of women in all aspects of life, and this liberation of Black women specifically, because then it was keyed in on the issues that Black women face. And then you also had some really noticeable Black women on the continent that I was
Mm-hmm.
able to like key into, and I was like, wow, the work that they're doing for women, especially women on the continent that is Africa, is really dope. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
something I took too. But particularly for intersectional feminism, it kind of deals with the isms that is like, um what are my identities? So as I am a Black woman, I am
Mm-hmm.
able-bodied, I am
Mm-hmm.
educated, I'm straight, I am Christian, which is Christian. Um, damn, I'm missing a other. I think I'm missing some, but like it's identifying, your
Okay.
identities within the spectrum, and then also identifying where you have privilege and where you don't. So like as a
Okay.
Christian, like in America, I have privilege because obviously America is a
Mm-hmm.
Christian country, or tends to be Christianly, or tends to be more favorable to Christians. In other parts of the world, that might not be such an advantage. Being Black and being female is seen as a disadvantage everywhere, or every and anywhere. And so like I don't have privileges on those, but I'm an able-bodied person. That means I'm able to do things for myself. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
also educated, which is a privilege for a lot of for a lot of people. And so like,
Mm-hmm.
identifying my identities, identifying where I have privilege in, and then also like using that privilege to fight for other people, and
Okay.
also identify as where I have a quote unquote disadvantage, where I'm not so privileged, and then also advocating for the advancement of those identities. I think that kind of sums it up pretty much.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy. It looks like you're preparing to be like the woman messiah, or
No,
something, if
no,
we could put it like
absolutely
that.
not. Absolutely
Yeah,
not. That is
but but anyway, any women out there, they're lucky to have like you paint this picture, because this whole concept of feminism is very complicated.
very,
It's you have to perform major surgery on the idea of feminism to even understand or fit yourself in.
yeah. It's I
Mhm.
think I honestly I want to say that like in with our podcast, like also coming
Mhm.
up with Lala, it was
Mhm.
something that like I think my role within the feminist movement, the womanist movement, and also within feminism is something that
Yeah.
I'm growing into. It, I
Okay.
don't I don't necessarily see myself as a messiah or arrive. I would
Mhm.
definitely chalk it up to like those women that literally made those terms, and made those spaces for Black women and women like myself to be able to even entertain. So I would leave it up
Uh-huh.
to them. If y'all are looking for some really notable women to follow, then I would definitely follow the OGs. But it's
Uh-huh.
it's like a path I chose, right? And then I'm going on this path, and as I'm going on, I'm obviously learning about certain things, and then like I'm also turning around and feeding and I would say giving that knowledge off to the people that are listening to the podcast and
Yeah.
interacting with me on social media or in real life.
Mhm.
um, it's one of those ways that you change the world. You educate people about issues, especially issues that pertain to Black women, because, you know, as we see around in the world, Black women are the most disrespected, the most underrated people in the world. And so, you really
Mhm.
have to teach people about these things, because some people act like they're not aware, and some people just aren't aware. There's
Yeah.
that.
So, yeah, it's a lot of ignorance out there, but actually, I mean, we as Black people, um, I don't know why. If there's a God out there, well, I believe in God, but
Hmm.
I'm just trying to be very general. If
Hmm.
there's a God out there, he or she carved out like a very heavy burden and put on us. So, but in
Yeah.
terms of theology or whatever it is that describes such issues, it means that we have a lot of responsibility. Maybe we could handle the heat, so that's why we are the ones experiencing that. Because when I look at uh, Black people in power, like
Hmm. Hmm.
Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, there's a lot of grace in their actions.
Hmm.
Yeah, they remind me of these virtues that we've always been taught about, like while growing up, like
Hmm.
patience, humility, uh, compassion, and wisdom. I'll give you an example. The President Obama, he had many he received jabs from the media, for example. Can you remember when the Harvard professor was
Oh yeah,
arrested for
yeah.
trying to get into his own
His house. Yeah,
house?
I remember that vividly. And
Yeah,
he invited him and the police officer over to the White House for a beer.
yeah, right. Yeah, remember when Obama said he's pretty sure he wouldn't have been arrested if he were white, and
Yeah, absolutely.
almost the whole country lashed out at him, saying he's dividing the country, he's a racist, and he had to apologize.
Yeah.
But if you look at what is happening today, the
Mm,
current president like says things
mm,
that if Obama
mm.
had said that, they would have roasted him alive.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
see
See,
what
you
I
see,
mean?
politics is a very dicey business, and like it's something that
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to reckon with. Especially like I have a political science degree now. I might get
Mm-hmm.
like another degree dealing with
Mm-hmm.
politics, but like even within the international relations, as Black people in politics, I feel like you
Mm-hmm.
have to move a little you have to move a little different. And also honestly, as him being the first Black quote unquote president that the US had
Mm-hmm.
ever had, based on the history of the US, the institution itself, there are obviously things he had to, or things he had to do, and there was a tightrope he had to, he obviously had to walk on. There are a lot of, criticisms about his policy and some of the things he did, but I think if you're going to be objective, you're going to have to understand that the position that he was in, like if he made it like too definitive statement about Black people, then large majority of the U.S. would then like lash out at him and say, "Oh, you're being racist," or "Why are you?"
Yeah.
Da, da, da. But then also the Black community felt like, as a Black man, he was their president, very much so, and when he didn't serve to push the Black community that much further than what they're already in, then it was very much a disappointment. So, but I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm going to be a politician for a second, like politics is a game where you have to play it
Mm-hmm.
very, you know, it's not my favorite thing, but it's a game that you have to play very carefully. And as the head of state of one of the greatest countries in the world, um, there's certain things you have to play, especially when it comes to race relations. I mean, there are a lot of Americans that won't even admit that
Yeah.
race is an issue. There are a lot of people who wouldn't even admit that racism is still a thing. I heard somebody recently say, "Oh, we still talking about the Confederate flag or the Confederacy?" I'm like, yes, we are, unfortunately. But like, white people can be dismissive about race, but
Yeah.
Black
Sure.
people can't, because it's something that we interact with, something that we're constantly interfacing with. So,
Yeah.
when I see people say stuff like that, I'm just like, Lord. So, if you can't even get people to admit that racism is still an
Mm-hmm.
issue,
Yeah.
then it's like when you get
Mm-hmm.
a head of state that says something, especially based on his experiences as a Black man at one time or another in his life, then people are like, "Oh, you're being divisive," when it's not. In fact, you're just
Yeah.
stating the realities of Black people every day in America. But something else that you said, I think when you first started the statement about us having a heavier burden,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big theological fan. I think
Mm-hmm.
the most I do is maybe dip and dabble in certain readings, but I think especially now
Mm-hmm.
I am straying away from any argument that paints the picture of Black people, especially Black women, being strong,
Okay.
because it makes it seem as if our value is placed on how much burden we, like how much we can bear. Like
Okay. I
obviously
see. Mm-hmm.
people have to exert grace in certain situations, but like that narrative of Black women being strong is it's really really harmful, because it's like then you just take
Yeah.
everything, and then
Like you're
even
stretching.
now you just take everything,
Yeah.
even now as we're seeing with Black women coming up about sexual assault, or things that disproportionately affect Black women. Even the Black men in the community are like, "What are you talking about? It's not real." And and there's a lot of gaslighting when it comes to Black women about issues that they face, that because, oh, as a Black woman you're supposed to be strong, so if you're a strong Black woman, why are you complaining about it? And more so for me, speaking as an African woman, it's like, oh man, that is a staple of your identity. Strong African woman, you're just supposed to take certain things, and then when you rise above, or let me not even say rise above, because that sounds very dismissive to women, but when
Yeah. Right.
you get out of that mindset and you're just like, yo, like I'm dealing with mental issues as an African woman, I have so
Mm-hmm.
much on my shoulders, there's certain things that I'm dealing with that people aren't addressing, which is why like womanism is a
Mm-hmm.
thing, and intersectional
Okay.
feminism. There's certain issues, key issues that I'm dealing with as a woman, as an African woman. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
but you're strong African women. Why are you complaining? And it's so dismissive to the core problems that Black women and African women around the world deal with. So I think now it's just like you know you know picking out some of the things that we've been fed, and also like examining why they are and how sort of dangerous those rhetorics can be,
Mm-hmm.
especially just today and with what's going on. So yeah, that's kind of
Yeah, I see.
that.
Yeah, I see. Concerning the issue of dismissing the, let's say, the cries of like black people and
Mm-hmm.
maybe terming it as trying to bring division, it's not new.
Mm,
Malcolm X actually painted a powerful picture when it came to that, because he was trying to elevate his people.
mm,
And but if you follow these words, he used words like for humanity.
mm,
And if we look at it from a linguistic point of view, when you're dealing with humanity, it's more abstract.
mm,
And then, although like black is also abstract, but when we
mm,
talk of black people, that is kind of concrete. So
mm,
yes, we're trying to solve issues with humanity, but the concrete case or use case or people or set that is suffering from it, is the black people.
mm.
So he said, one issue is noticed with the white man. Let me use that. I'm quoting Malcolm X here. I'm not trying to cause division. So, so he said one issue he noticed with the white man is that when you point out a problem to him, he doesn't try to look at the root cause. Instead of looking at the root cause and trying to solve it, he then tries to escape from it and then starts playing this game, this like, kind of like blame game. And
Mm,
that's what
mm.
always happens.
Yeah.
Like, if, for example, what Obama said, if if we look at the country like this, this you know how a dam generates electricity.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a country like some energy source, like producing electricity, it means let's say the percentage of people that lash out at the president can be likened to the percentage of electricity that was used to power that kind of hate and that kind of blame game at that time. Whereas if we had, as a country, had used that energy to try to look at the root cause and how things can be fixed, then you see the words of
Yeah.
Malcolm
Yeah,
kind of,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. But
Mm-hmm.
it's also the Black Lives Matter movement, for example. Like
Mm-hmm.
Black Lives Matter. Why is that a
Mm-hmm.
controversial statement? You know, and
Mm-hmm.
even like I mean
I see.
I'm gonna keep tying things to women, especially Black women, because I am a Black woman.
Uh-huh.
But like even the whole like Black Lives Matter and how like when it first became a thing, people were just like, oh, it's a controversial statement. Black Lives Matter,
Mm-hmm.
all lives matter, and people are just like, it's I mean funny. Recently, a comedian, I don't know his name, but he has a Netflix special. I'm gonna watch it when I get to. But he's like, yo, like Black Lives Matter is a controversial statement. Why? Black Lives Matter. How is that like on its own? Like if you're talking even
Mm-hmm.
about linguistically,
Yeah.
somebody saying Black Lives Matter, just no context. Black Lives
Mm-hmm.
Matter. How
Yeah.
is that controversial? Or somebody,
It's not.
or like, and then he was like, even if you break it down to the very basics of what people
Mm-hmm.
in the '60s were asking for was like, people asking for for basic human rights, and even that's an
Yeah.
issue. Or
Yeah.
like especially people that are part of the LGBTQIA community,
Uh-huh.
or Black trans women that are being disproportionately killed at an alarming rate and not having anybody focus on that. Even when people are
Mm-hmm.
asking, he's like, people ask for basic human rights, and
Yeah.
it's like people having a problem with that. And for me, it got to a point where I was like, what? Like, are we done? Like, Black Lives Matter. That is not a controversial statement. But again, you always have people, and I would say white America, a lot of people aren't ready to confront the issue. Racism, but what it is the reason why we're still fighting about the Confederacy, when
Yeah.
at its very core it was an insult to the Union, which is the United States, but people are still celebrating that like it's part of culture, when it was a bunch of traitors that seceded.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you bring up Black Lives Matter. Oh, like, Black women, the sexual assault, where Black women are reporting sexual assault and people aren't listening. And then all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
people are just like, why do women hate men? Not, again, refusing to focus on the core issues and how you can
Mm-hmm.
solve certain things. So it's like that. I mean, it was very relevant then when Malcolm X said it and a bunch of other people said it, but it's even more relevant now with black women
Mm-hmm.
coming out and saying, yo, there's
Yeah.
a problem, or with black people coming out with the Black Lives Matter movement and
Mm-hmm.
saying, yo, there's a problem, and then, you know, people dismissing it and talking about it's inciting division, it's inciting violence. And
Yeah.
the only thing I
That's
have to say is that, like, we can't continue to sweep things under the rug, you know.
yeah. True. True.
You know,
Yeah.
people were rioting, you know, because they had gotten to a point where they were very fed up. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, people are ready to burn things to the ground because for so long, when people have come out and be like, oh, we have a problem, people are like, go
Mm-hmm.
back and reevaluate your language before
Yeah.
you come to me. And it's like, huh? Huh?
Can you imagine? And from what you said about sweeping things under the rug, it's very dangerous because when you sweep things under the rug, bacteria would accumulate there and you get sick later.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
even if we do it as a people, it's gonna bite us later.
But very, and it's
Yeah.
it's doing that now, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah. About Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, I think this is something that history is really gonna like talk about or like enlighten those that come after us
Mm,
because it just shows a lot of ignorance when that is said, and I'll tell you why. It may take some time to explain that, but my reason is that it's the same thing. So those who use all lives matter to like counter Black Lives Matter, they are making a mistake. That's why I say
right.
history would like enlighten people, and I'll tell you why. That you see, like philosophy is defined as love of wisdom, right? And
Mm,
is the mother cause that encompasses almost all of knowledge because everything that we know is like an instance of wisdom in whatever
mm,
form it appears.
mm,
So now, logic is a property of the human mind. In the simplest case, so long as you can say next and previous, then you're already
mm.
being logical,
Okay.
right? Okay,
Mm,
so now there's the idea of induction in logic where you could travel to the future with your mind or like logically, but because of induction, I'll give you an example. Uh, the sun rises every day, so the
mm,
sun will rise tomorrow. So we are thinking inductively then. That's we're
mm,
starting from a particular case and then
mm.
we're scaling into the future, right?
Right, right.
So yeah, this today's the day, the sun rose today, so the sun will rise tomorrow. All right. The other way of thinking logically and philosophically is deductively. Right.
Mm,
I'm sure you did that in political science when you're doing logic. So
yeah.
you start with the general case and then you
Mm-hmm.
bring it down to the particular case. So we would say that the sun rises every day. Today is a day, hence the sun is going to rise,
Right.
right? So if we use that logic, you see that when it comes to Black Lives Matter, you could say all lives matter, right? So Black lives are lives.
Mm,
Therefore, Black lives matter.
right.
So that's what I'm saying. Those that use all lives matter and try to counter the fact that Black lives matter, they're just showing some kind of immense ignorance that if you look at the property of the human mind in its most primitive forms, then people saying Black Lives Matter are just showing you an instance of a bigger picture.
Right,
So if you
right.
are refusing it, with the bigger picture itself, then you're just being, I don't know, but it's just so stupid to me. But uh, what I really don't understand is when I try to put that out and some people say I'm diluting it
Mm-hmm.
because it's a fact. And that's what they call the syllogism, right? You say you start with the general case, again, all lives matter. You
Mm-hmm.
come now to the particular, Black lives are lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then, therefore, Black lives matter.
Okay.
The same
Yeah.
like we would say, the sun rises every day.
Mm-hmm.
Today's a day,
Mm-hmm.
therefore the sun will rise today. Something like that. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to put that out there,
Yeah, I
actually.
mean, in terms of that, I get,
Hmm.
and you know, obviously what you're saying makes a lot of logical sense. Is that and the third,
Hmm.
but I think things and things hold certain symbols to them. Like the reason
Okay.
why, you know, all lives matter, duh. But the reason why I don't put it in within this conversation is because it's already a given. But specifically
Yes.
in this case, it has been
Hmm.
used as a symbol
Okay.
to negate Black lives, period.
Hmm.
And so I think that's why certain people feel like it's diluting because
Mm-hmm.
that all lives matter, that
Mm-hmm.
quotation, like, as a logical like, as a thought, it's an obvious, but in this
Yeah.
specific context, it has been, how do you call it, it's been trademarked to mean something very specific, and in this case, it literally is the negation of Black lives. And so when people,
Yeah.
like,
Mm-hmm.
emphasize what all lives matter, specifically in this context, is like, I know what you're doing. It's not that all lives matters what they do, is that in this specific context, you've used something that has been used as a trope to then negate Black lives. So that's why a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people focus, like, the focus is, and as Black people, as a Black person, the focus is Black lives matters all day, every day,
Yeah.
and
True.
so
True.
people use it as a, and I don't know which reasoning this will go under, but it's like Black lives matter, but the world is showing that they don't in this moment. So we're
Yeah.
highlighting that Black lives matter. And so
Exactly.
until Black lives matter, all lives will not matter. Until Black
Exactly.
trans lives matter,
Exactly.
all lives will not matter. Until Black women's lives matter, all lives will not matter. And so a lot of people use it from that point of view to emphasize what we're really going through. Not because again, when it
Yeah.
comes to
I
politics
get
and
it.
other things,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to politics and other people like to, I'm going to use dilute for lack of a better word, but kind of play wishy-washy instead of making
Yeah.
definitive statements about what's really going on. And that's what, in this time, that's what people really need. People need people to make definitive statements, because Black women are being killed, Black men are being killed, Black trans are being killed. Like, we need you
Mm-hmm.
to make a definitive. We don't need you to come out and be like, yeah, like, play. No, we need to be very definitive. This is the moment to be very straightforward, that this is what we're fighting to. This is an
Yeah.
epidemic. We need to eradicate it, period.
Yeah, you brought up a very important point about how, like, stressing that Black Lives Matter is just to show you that, as an instance of all lives should matter if only Black Lives Matter.
Mhm.
Because, like, if we're looking at proof here, then it's very easy to counter the argument that all lives matter, because
Right.
it's like saying that, let's say, all cars in Maryland are white,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm just saying, or let's not use white. That's the kind of word. Let's
Mm-hmm.
say someone says all cars in Maryland are red, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to counter that by just showing one blue car.
Right,
So
right.
you say, if you say all, mathematically they will use the opposite A. Be
Mm-hmm.
like, for all things that are cars,
Mm-hmm.
they have the color red. And then
Mm-hmm.
if you just show them that no, there exists one blue car, you've counted it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to paint what you said in a
Right,
mathematical way.
right. Yeah.
So if they say all lives matter, and then you say no, there is one Black life that you're showing that it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you say all lives matter if this
Matter.
one Black life that
Right,
you're
right,
treating
right.
as though it's not life? Yeah. Anyway, so that's why I was saying that history is going to show how ignorant we were at these times,
Mm-hmm.
because we have heard of the Stone Ages, the Dark Ages. I think this is another form of Dark Age that is just disheartening, because we human beings, we don't use our minds, logic, and what you just painted are, those are basic properties of human beings. That's what distinguishes us from animals.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Right.
animals actually, but if you take any set of things that have common abilities, you judge them by their highest ability.
Mm-hmm.
That's why a horse is almost like a donkey. They're the same kind of animal, right? But the donkey is good at carrying load, and then the horse is good at, like, carrying load, not much load, but running faster. So
Mm-hmm.
if you are looking at war, for example, you pick a horse because you want to go faster with it. So you're judging the horse for its highest abilities. So we as human beings were judged as humans because of our high ability for logic, or with logic. So if we don't use our minds, then we're just being animals.
That's interesting. That's an interesting take. I think that's a really interesting take. I mean, again, if I'm gonna spin it in political sciencey terms, I would just say
Mm-hmm.
that there have been nations and systems and forms of government that have been built
Mm-hmm.
on the backs of other humans,
Yeah.
built um to keep humans down,
Mm-hmm.
to disregard other humans down, aka Black people. And it's been something that, like, every generation, I guess, has every not I guess every generation has made a step forward. But again, when white people become uncomfortable, it's like, all right, we've done enough. We'll leave the rest for the next generation. when the reality is that from the very beginning there shouldn't have been a distinction where it was then black people will receive less or black people will be treated less than. So it's like, trying to, you know fix that and make it so that at the very basic level, all human
Mm-hmm.
beings, whether or not you're black or white, have basic human like rights.
Yeah.
The right to be treated decently in
Mm-hmm.
all aspects of life. And
Mm-hmm.
when and I saw this on Twitter, and I don't like, it was so funny. Somebody was like, y'all lucky black people aren't asking for revenge or just asking for equality. Cause
So
it's
let's
like,
see.
like after everything, black people have been through
Yeah.
it. And this is another thing that I don't know if we'll get to, but like,
Mm-hmm.
when I look at the movement, for me, the movement is about black liberation worldwide. You're black regardless of your ethnicity. You're black regardless of your nationality. And so when this whole thing was going down, I had a problem with the African community, because I was like, especially as Africans living in the U.S., you're black. You're black first. And I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't hearing anybody from that in the African immigrant community that were really speaking out very definitively about this, because I was a little scared. I was like, your kids are going to grow up with the reality of being black in America, and like
Yeah.
regardless of the fact that you're from a different continent, whatever, you have to think about it because you're black. Black people all over the world have been oppressed. There's systems that exist all over the world, even on the continent itself,
Yeah.
to keep black people down, to continuously oppress black people. So when you look at this movement in time, it could be Black Lives Matter, but you have to understand that, like, the bigger picture is is for the total liberation of black peoples, all black
Yeah.
peoples, and so that was one of those things. I was like, we really have to come together and really fight this. We're fighting against white supremacy, we're fighting against
Mm-hmm.
racism, and we're fighting for the liberation of black people, regardless of whether you're black British, regardless of whether you're Cameroonian, regardless of whether you're
Yeah.
Nigerian American, regardless of
Mm-hmm.
whether you're German, you're black and you're German, or whatever it is. Like,
Yeah.
it's something that we all have a stake in, and we should all partake in. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that was
Very
a
true.
big thing for me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, what you just said reminds me of the works of Frantz Fanon. Have you ever?
France
Yeah.
Fanon. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Fanon has this book, Blackface, White Mask, where he describes like colonialism as the process of transforming like a human into an animal
Mm,
or a thing. And but the what I really like about it is how fair he tries to be,
mm,
because sometimes when we want to talk about these issues from our own experience,
mm,
like we just said, we'll be pointed at as trying to cause division. So
mm,
he painted a more universal picture, saying that the whole world is like effed up
mm,
because like when you if you're trying to turn some human into an animal, you can only do that if you're an animal. So in the
mm.
process of turning a human being into an animal, you'll be so cruel that you yourself will become an animal.
You
So
know, go ahead.
both sides, so the whole world just becomes this messed up place. You see, so it's something that even if we talk about decolonization, it's not a process just for Black people. So it's not something that just Black people can change. It's something for the whole world to change. And it comes back to that idea of like logic and truth. If some, if when we go, all lives matter, Black lives are Black, our lives, therefore, Black lives matter. So it's because truth is something that is more universal. And when we
Mm,
talk of wisdom, it's something that should encapsulate everything. So
mm,
in that case, uh, decolonization is not just an issue for waking Black people, it's the whole world. All of us have
mm,
to wake up. If not, we
mm,
will not do anything, because there
mm,
will be this ping pong match between Black people trying to wake up. But let's say it's like you becoming human. But if
mm,
the other faction is still an animal,
mm,
they have the system, they have the power. So that animalistic nature in them will just pull us back into the mess
mm.
that we're trying to escape from. So it's the thing that all of us need to
I need to
do.
do.
Yeah.
I don't know how comfortable I am with that theory, because
Mm-hmm.
we had a lot of white slave owners sort of use that theory that
Mm-hmm.
slavery had become something that had turned white people into animals, therefore they should end slavery. And so, like, I'm not sure how
Mm-hmm.
comfortable I am with that logic, because
Okay.
I feel like it's also something that has been used by white people to be like, all right, we're done oppressing people now, or 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 slavery has become too much of a burden for us because it's literally turned us into
Mhm.
animals, that like
Mhm.
it's now time for us to get rid of it so that we can continue to be this sort of superior race. Because
Oh, I
again,
see.
that's what white people during that time and during this time too perceive themselves as being the superior race. And
Mhm.
they unfortunately dabbled in slavery, that sort of like moved their position in the world a little bit, and then now they need to let it go because like it's messed with their superiority. And so I'm
Mhm.
not sure how comfortable I am with that logic. I
Yeah, I
think the
see.
only thing I will say to that is that like black people didn't choose to be categorized as less than human, obviously.
Mhm.
um uh, uh Europeans decided to come up with the term white man,
Mhm.
or Europeans decided to come up with the classifications of race so that they could classify themselves as better and then people as other. And so for
Mhm.
me, like the burden is not on us as black people to
Yeah,
get
I
somebody
see.
to realize our humanity. Like,
Oh yeah, I get
our
that. Mhm.
we were humans when we were on this world. We've always been humans, but it's white people that, in essence, messed up their humanity when they decided to, make up race and then start classifying people, so that they could then literally oppress people for generations. So, I moving the onus from us black people and people of color to
Mhm.
them, and to be like, white people, this is something that y'all have to deal with because y'all decided to become something else so that y'all
Mhm.
could then mess up other people. And so, you know uh, regardless of whatever it happens, honestly, the burden for the institution falls
Mhm.
completely on white people in this case. Like, shit, I'm black. I didn't ask to be black,
Yeah.
but I'm black and I'm proud. So
Yeah, I see. I see what you mean.
yeah.
So actually, when we're talking about Obama, like you pointed out something that struck me
Mm,
about how like a lot of black people were expecting him to bring some kind of change,
mm,
right? And
mm.
what I kind of absorbed from that is that maybe he didn't bring the change.
He definitely
So
did.
yeah, I would like to jump a little into that, and just say what I know about what he did.
Mm,
That's in service of the truth.
mm,
So if
mm.
you,
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely.
yeah, so normally when we use words like system,
Mm,
because people say like, how do they say systemic racism?
mm.
Is that the word? Yeah, so
Systemic racism, yeah.
system racism. So if we use the word like system, it means the system itself is a sum total of the pieces. Some are more primitive and then some are higher level. Just like in English, the English language is like a system, right? The
Mm,
most the most primitive is the alphabet, A to Z, and then you have the comma and stuff like that.
mm,
And we start building on top of that by spelling words like your name, Nora,
mm,
is like using the primitives. And then we
mm,
build phrases,
mm,
paragraphs,
mm,
chapters, books, sections in the library, and categories and stuff like that. So the whole system is built from those primitives.
mm,
So which means if someone is bringing change, you have several levels. You could decide
mm,
and change it at the level of the alphabet,
mm,
change
mm,
it at the level of the sentence, change
mm,
it at the level, yeah. So I learned, or I came, there were some contradictions that were in the system that a lot of politicians have seen. Those that are trying to bring change, especially when it comes to uh, human rights.
mm,
One, there are some statements that are thrown in America against the black community, like the men are never at home to
mm,
raise their kids,
mm,
and one of the reasons is that. A lot of them go to jail because of against systemic racism where
mass incarceration,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Black
exactly,
people are
where
disproportionately.
exactly crack and cocaine are the same kind of drugs, but the crack is the cheaper one.
Mm,
So crack is criminalized, right?
mm,
Why
mm,
coke, there are no laws, there are fewer laws, or the laws against cocaine are not
mm.
as brutal as the laws against crack.
Yeah,
But
it's
that,
the same with
yeah,
marijuana, like, and how
exactly, yeah.
it's
Mm-hmm.
policed differently with black people than it is with white people. So
Yes. So with that, a lot of these black people end up in jail because they're consuming what they know how to use, or what they use is what is criminalized. So they end up in jail, and then when they come out, they can't have jobs. So
Jobs,
now,
yeah.
if you are like a convict, or if you have been, there's another word for it that I can't remember. So, but if you have been to jail and stuff like that,
Incarcerated.
maybe, yes, incarcerated, maybe you can have, you can take loans to start a business.
Mm-hmm.
You can have like student loans. You can live in public housing. So if you have a family, you have a wife and kids, because you have been incarcerated or because you're a convict, you can't go live in that public house.
Mm-hmm.
So that's already one way that the system like removes those black people from the lives of their families.
Mm-hmm.
Now they may have ideas to start businesses, but they can't, because the
Mm-hmm.
law again. So the law is kind of against you one way or the
Mm-hmm.
other.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you remember, there was this time when Obama tried to make community colleges free.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was him trying to go down at that level of the system, which is more primitive, to undo those laws that were blocking black people.
Mm-hmm.
So those at the top, if you were looking at him, or if those were looking at him and expecting to see what he has done, would not see it, because they're at a higher level. So he
Mm-hmm.
was trying to fix those laws at the
Yeah.
very
No.
low
Yeah.
level. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get your point completely, but like
Mm-hmm.
different people in different aspects of politics, like based on where you fall on the
Yeah.
ideological scale, will say, oh,
Mm-hmm.
Obama didn't do enough in this aspect. Obama was too. So, different people on the political scale will always say he didn't do enough, or didn't do the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's just how politics goes. What I mean by that too is like that was one black man within a system that spans hundreds of years and has only been white men.
Yeah. I
So
see.
like I mean like it was very much, I don't know if idealistic is the right word for people to think that one
Mm-hmm.
black man after 200 and some plus years would come and dismantle the whole system.
In four
So
years or 8 years.
but like still like after hundreds of years compared to 8 years, and then thinking about the fact that when the country was, before the country was even a thing, it had already
Mm-hmm.
instituted slavery. So people like him were enslaved and had no rights, and it wasn't until
Mm-hmm.
very very recently that black men had the right to vote before black women. um
Mm-hmm.
and even now, and even as he was being voted in, that black people still still trying to suppress black votes. If we're speaking about the criminal justice, I think there was his name escapes me right now, but he was running for governor in Florida. Oh, his name escapes me. I'm really annoyed, but him and some other Democrats were doing some really good work in trying to reinstitute um
Mm-hmm.
a former felons their rights to vote, because that's something that certain states take away to suppress again the black vote. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, I understand on a systematic on a level, there was no way that Obama was going to spend 8 years and change everything for black people. And I felt like those people who had that in mind were
Yeah.
obviously disappointed. But you know, he's not without criticism, and obviously some of his policies are just not great.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
mean, if you
That's
look
true.
at what because like also he was taking office, we were in like a really major economic downturn. He had to make sure that the
Yeah.
world's economy didn't crash. There was
Mm-hmm.
an ongoing war, trying to pull out of that. The United States healthcare system was trash.
Yeah.
And getting the Affordable Care Act through when Republicans were trying to make sure that people didn't have healthcare. So there were a lot of things that because he was the president of the United States, not just the president for black people. So there were a
Yeah.
lot of immediate things that he had to take care of so that the country and sort of the world didn't crash and burn. But like I said, there's certain things that if you didn't pay attention to on a local level, you would have missed some of the
Yeah.
critical things that he, as well as the Democratic Party, was trying to do to help black people. Now, to be fair as well, there are a lot of criticism because, politics changes with who you're trying to gain favor with. So the same people that might be trying to help, black people gain rights now could be the
Mm-hmm.
same people that are passing laws in Congress to disenfranchise black people. And so,
Yeah.
that's
So,
how the game
yeah.
is. And so, people are very critical of that. People, because people are like, oh, now you're doing that. Oh, but weren't you part of the signatures on the bill, to increase policing for Black communities, to
Yeah.
increase racial profiling for Black people. And so that's why people are really critical, not just that
Mm-hmm.
he didn't do anything, but he couldn't have done
Yeah.
it.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
I think
That's
the question that a lot of Black people were asking is like, did he do enough? And to be honest, that's a question for Andrew Gillum. I
Andrew.
really loved. He had a really good future, but then something happened. But
Yeah.
you know,
Politics is so.
it's something where every Black people are not a monolith. Obviously, they have different ideas, different sort of ideology. So I think within Black people in the Black community, a lot of people were, did he do enough? Did he do enough? And some people are like, he did enough. Other people are like, obviously there's just these things that still aren't being done, and the fact that the way politics work with Congress, people or with representatives voting for things that continue to disenfranchise people, and he was president
Mm-hmm.
while that was happening. So a lot of people do hold him responsible, as they should, for some of those things that
Mm-hmm.
were able to pass through. And so it's like, did he do enough? Did he
Yeah.
falter in this way?
So,
Was he wishy-washy on certain things? And it's like, absolutely, he's a politician. Yeah.
yeah. I see. Yeah. And also one thing that you know the ancient Greeks, and this is an idea that flowed through from Egypt, uh, settled on the idea that politics is the greatest art, because they saw life as like transition, right? Like
Mhm.
you're somewhere and then you have a target, and so you need something to take you from your wishes to your destination, or from your current location, your source to your destination. So those tools, sometimes we could look at them in the most concrete sense as maybe objects or items,
Mm.
or tools, but at the abstract level, they're like arts and crafts. So, which means that as a nation, if you want to achieve common good for all from where you are, then the craft that you need, maybe politics, religion, stuff
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm.
So they held that politics is the greatest art. And the simplest reason is because if through politics, we decide that we'll eat just potatoes. Everyone will be eating potatoes.
Mhm. Mhm.
If it's through politics that the
Mhm.
country can decide that this is the kind of education would have, this is the kinds of
Mhm.
the politics then is the most important.
Mhm.
So now and then Plato doubled that, or when he was trying to explain that, he said that those who don't participate in politics will end up being ruled by those that are inferior. I don't want
Uh,
to use that to separate people, but just
mhm.
to say if you don't participate, then you have somebody that maybe morally is inferior because they will probably embezzle your money and
Mm.
be ruling you, right?
Mhm.
So that
Mhm.
so that brings me to the point that when Obama was like in power, there's some actions that he took, and there were some that he was probably ready to do, but
Mhm.
people did not experience him doing that because they didn't go towards that direction. I'll give you an
Mhm.
example. He attended some protests, right? There's some protests that Obama was there. He went and
Mhm.
marched. Like I remember him marching once, right? So
Mhm.
the people started that, and as a leader, he was there with them, right?
Mhm.
There were times when he interviewed uh, entrepreneurs like Jack Ma. He went to
Mhm.
the Caribbeans and spoke to youths. He went
Mhm.
to other schools and spoke about AI, and that's because there were groups of people that were bringing up AI. So
Mhm.
mostly you have a set of people that just sit down and say Obama is doing nothing. They didn't
Mhm.
try to start a movement or like an
Mhm. Yeah.
endeavor. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So I
So
mean,
it's very
yeah,
tricky. So it's very tricky too.
it's very tricky. I mean,
Mhm.
it's I think the people who are intelligent enough, much more intelligent than I am,
Mhm.
um, are able to criticize him on policy, policy wise. But we like if we're talking about systemic racism, we also have to like look at the system. Um, you have a Senate that has been old rich white men's club for so long, no diversity.
Mhm.
We have Congress that doesn't represent, starting to look like it, but for a long time didn't represent the U.S.
Mhm.
populace. And you
Mhm.
had other entities, even like state and local structures that were obviously rooted in racism, and we're trying to grow out of that. But I think what people have to understand is that like and I think what people are not understanding is that there's certain things you have to burn down just because the origins aren't like they aren't conducive to reform.
Mhm.
I think an example of that would be the police with the defund and abolish the police. When I myself and a lot of people started to realize that policing, when it comes to Black people, has very deep roots in slavery,
Yeah,
and
true.
so like you're talking about reforming. How can you reform a system that was made to murder and keep Black people? And so on a policy level, there are a lot of very good intelligent policymakers, like people a lot more intelligent than I am, that are proposing things like, oh, do this, do this, do this. But when a system continues to show over and over and over again
Mhm.
that it is not going to change and it cannot be changed, then what you need to do is burn that whole thing to the ground and make a new one. And
I see.
for those people that are talking about, but I can't imagine, da, da, da. Well, there was a time that there was none,
Mm-hmm.
and people were able to live life. People had other systems in place that were
Yeah.
able to handle their thing. So it's not where I feel like we're very much intelligent. We have a lot of systems, AI, artificial
Mm-hmm.
intelligence, and other really sophisticated technology that we can use to create things that is better able to that are better able to handle the environment, the time that we're in. And
Yeah,
again,
true.
for those people that continue to hold on to ancient norms in the name of politics, the
Mm-hmm.
Confederacy, policing, um other very stupid policies that at its core rooted in slavery and division. It's like things have
Yeah,
to
I see.
change, but I
Yeah.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
to your point about making an impact, or participating. I think it always comes down to people telling people like, vote, but
Yeah.
when you put into perspective the fact that
Mm-hmm.
Black people just very recently got the right to vote, voter suppression is still very much a thing. There's
Mm-hmm.
gerrymandering where people, districts are gerrymandered so much so that there's only going to be a very specific type of candidate that's going to come out each time. You know, it's weird. It's almost resembling sort of like, I hate to use this term. I really hate to use this term, but very third world country-ish mannerisms in terms of voter
Okay.
suppression. It's like, I feel like it's very disingenuous for those people who are like, the way you can participate in politics is just to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's not the reality. You can become candidate. You can become the candidate itself. You can
Yeah.
become sort of the rock that people can then build new systems on. Um,
Yeah.
you can challenge the norms. You can burn certain systems to the ground. You can burn
Mm-hmm.
certain statues, Confederate statues, to the
Yeah,
ground.
yeah, so
And you can really dismantle the whole system starting from a very local level and create
mm-hmm.
something that you feel like will be conducive to your people, especially Black people. And then you move up from there. Realistically, everything is not going to change at once overnight. It took years to build it. It's going to take a
Mm-hmm.
long time to break it down, but the way you can get involved is by understanding and then building things that other people that look like you can benefit from. you know
Mm-hmm.
the just voting trope isn't very genuine, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not working. And somebody said this, and then I realized that when you vote for people, whether or not it's a Democrat and you're a Democrat, you're voting
Mm-hmm.
and everything is left to fate. Because
Yeah,
when you
true.
vote for a politician, they can go in and do what they say they're going to do or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so when
Mm-hmm.
you are voting, you're voting and you're hoping that the person you're voting for is going to do what they say. But in reality,
Yeah.
when they don't, you're stuck in this system, in this cycle, that you're voting for politicians that are just saying one thing and not doing it. They're continuing this cycle, and this system is kept in place that's not benefiting people, especially
Yeah.
Black people, at the very local level. And so, when people say burn things to the ground, I'm for it, because if it's not working and people aren't
Mm-hmm.
conducive to reform, burn it down and build something that people can benefit from.
Yeah, well, just to throw some light, or to chime in again, it also comes back to what we're saying. Like, the leader goes in and does what he's doing, but he's also ready to do certain things that come up.
Mm,
So mostly when people vote, they go sit and start waiting for the change,
mm,
forgetting that you have powers within even your local communities,
Yeah.
even like your brigade, however
Mhm.
they call those. If
Mhm.
there's something wrong, people could either protest or write to a representative, and then they'll take it up just like
Mhm.
that. But mostly
Mhm.
people vote and don't write.
Mhm.
So the politician is there. They would often triage things, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
what is pressing. So if nothing comes up to unbalance that setup, that backlog that they're picking up items from, then they'll just have the opportunity to receive what lobbyists are bringing in.
Mhm.
You see,
Mhm.
and if you follow Bobby Seale, like that's one of the founders of the Black Panthers, right?
Mhm.
He We could give credit to him immensely for the change that we see, especially Black people participating in politics,
Right.
because they
Absolutely.
had a goal. They had a goal that would empower and protect Black people, but we have to use the system. So
Right.
they used the law, even when they were working with guns that
Mhm.
were not
Yeah.
loaded. That was part of the law, and they started training people to understand politics, their rights, and to go for the votes. And Black people started getting voted, but that was not just because they participated in the elections. It was also because they were trained and they handled on the other tasks like
Mhm.
campaigns.
Mhm.
And so, in the same way that they pumped in energy into campaigns and got the results, whenever one is voted, we shouldn't just stop there. You
Mhm.
can always
Absolutely.
say, "Hi, there are potholes around my house."
Mhm.
If the state of that government needs to solve that, they would address it. You
Mhm.
see,
Absolutely.
so also the communities need to be educated to know that
Absolutely.
it's an
Absolutely.
active participation. If the country is an organism, then we need to constantly feed it with our actions.
Period. I said period. That's absolutely right. But like also also have to put things into perspective in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
educating and having certain rights. I feel like you work within the system that you have, and then
Mm-hmm.
again you burn those to the ground that aren't working, and then you build. You work to dismantle a system, or you work to reform a system.
Mm-hmm.
For the benefit of the people who are in it. And so
Mm-hmm.
absolutely I feel like there are a lot of greats that, especially the Black Panther, that we can emulate some of their actions, because
Yeah.
um if we want to see change, we have to be consistent. We can't
Mm-hmm.
just like, be politically active and just vote and sit down. You all right? It doesn't make any
Mm-hmm.
sense. But I also, to put things into perspective, I think there are gonna have to be some very immediate changes so that people can, first of all, be educated and
Mm-hmm.
people can participate. Like if you're talking about education, like, bro, this is a conversation, but like reforming the educational system, teaching history that is historically accurate.
Yeah. True.
Why are we whitewashing history? Why are we whitewashing slavery? Why are we whitewashing the founding fathers of this country, who
Mm-hmm.
definitely
Absolutely.
didn't have it within themselves for Black people to have rights? Why are we whitewashing the history of the very cities and states that we live in?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, for people to even be, informed citizens, or politically active citizens, they have to be educated, like,
Mm-hmm.
properly about the right things. And so, you know there are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of good initiatives and organizations out there that are fighting to bring the truth about history to people, so that,
Mm-hmm.
people, whenever, whether it's their leading movements or other things, are going to vote, they are
Mm-hmm.
informed. But I think,
Yeah.
before we're able to even get an education or be educated about certain things, we have to make sure the education system is serving the right purpose.
Mm-hmm.
um and then other things as well, like, I think everything ties in. Like, we also have to reform the healthcare system, like, especially as it pertains to Black people, and how, you know there's, I mean, like, things just like racial bias in medicine, and how Black people just, don't have access to certain things health wise, and then they're more susceptible to certain diseases later on in life. And then people are wondering why this is only affecting black community, and then all of a sudden there's stereotypes about certain things, is because of other things. And so, it's all in my mind. I feel like it all sorts of it all sort of works together.
Mm-hmm.
You then have experts, quote unquote, in the
Mm-hmm.
various fields that then come together, and put those things. But in order for your union, whatever, government to work, you actually have to participate.
Yeah,
Um,
true. Actively.
you have to be active. You have to participate. You have to keep badgering people.
Mhm.
But also at the very core, your government has to acknowledge its complete wrongdoing. Like
Yeah,
it's
true.
an insult and it's a continuous slap in the face to people when people act like racism doesn't still exist, has never existed. It's not conducive to a conversation that people want to have.
Yeah,
And I
right.
feel
I
like it starts
see.
from there.
Yeah, I see. That brings me to like Cameroon, because
Mm.
I'm sure there's certain people that will be listening to us like talking, and maybe they hear us talking about America and they're like, "This are Cameroonians. What are they doing? They don't love
Mm.
their country," or sitting with oily fingers and trying to type some kind of comments. But anyway, I'm trying to say that if we use all of what we're saying in the context of our country, what do you
Mm.
think are the steps that need to be taken to uh, start pointing a country towards the right direction? That's if and only
Woo.
if it's not in the right direction.
Woo. Damn. I think the same concepts apply pretty much. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my dad, I speak to my dad all the time. My dad has a PhD in African foreign policy. That's his niche, that's his thing. I'm also
Mm-hmm.
sort of getting into African politics. I'm still learning. But I
Mm-hmm.
think, as an adult, those are conversations I'm starting to have more and more with him. But I
Mm-hmm.
think the same principle applies. We have to be honest about our history in Africa. We have to be
Okay.
very honest about our history. There are a lot of things about Cameroon that I didn't learn onto very recently. A lot of
Okay.
ideas that people have, if we're speaking specifically about Cameroon, that um, Cameroonians in Cameroon don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
in order to have a union that is for the people, I think people have to understand your very basic history. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Politically, it's very complicated, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Honestly, shit, like you just have to have a system that works for the people. Like, stop embezzling public funds. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the head of state network is far greater than the GDP of the country. Make that make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Continuously contracting, signing out the rights of the people, the land that people are living in, to multinational corporations, like European or Western multinational corporations that are now taking advantage of people. I mean, hell, people in Congo barely have basic human decency, drinking water, food. There's ongoing wars, arming children, and it happens to be one of the richest countries in terms of natural resources. How does that happen? Um, so I think, just people. There's a lot of work. Shit, I'm gonna be honest. There's a lot of work we have to do. Starting from the heads of state, the people in power. I
Mm-hmm.
think people have to be fed up enough of leaders and politicians that are just there to screw people over,
Yeah, I see.
enough to change it, and then change can start. 'Cause there are a lot of groups stemming from way before my dad was born that have been fighting for liberties of average Cameroonians.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the people that you want making decisions. Those are the people you want to put in power. Screw
Yeah, I
everything
see.
else. Screw everything else.
Yeah, I see. But also, Uh, since we talked a little about colonialism, you see, Cameroon is suffering from a lot of issues. But
Mm.
if we go by the definition of colonialism, where you have one body that's trying to overtake the other one, and it's a vice that comes from things like imperialism. Is that how they
Mm.
call it?
Yeah.
Imperialism. Yeah, so it's always about domination. But if we look at it from the broadest perspective, without cutting or slicing it too much, we would have two main parts: internal and external.
Mm.
Where the external one is trying to overtake the lower one,
Mm.
or internal, where one part is trying to take over the other part. So you see that Cameroon has two types of colonialism going on in there at the same time. So there are other powers like from Europe and from wherever the rest of the world trying to
Mm.
take over the country and uh, oversee its policies, um, absorb or smoke its how do you call this, minerals or resources.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then there's also internally, there's also one part of the country that is trying to overtake another part.
Mhm.
Today I heard, I was listening to a show by Elonge. Uh,
Mhm.
by Elonge, I think they call it Freaky Table, where they were
Mhm.
talking about UB and how the university has changed, the
Oh,
Anglo-Saxon
universal
life.
boy, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the Anglo-Saxon life is eroding
Mm.
because of the policies, with the assistance of the policies that are implemented now, and how the country, the campus is becoming predominantly French
Mm.
and all the,
Yeah.
yeah, and things like that. So I don't want to get into the detail of that,
Mm.
but as a country, we're really suffering from two types of like colonialism. How shall we even get? It's like you kind of fight where you're fighting Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali at the same time. You see what I
Oh,
mean?
I I mean, it's really complicated, but I think the two forms of colonialism that I guess that you're talking about, it's the fact that,
Hmm.
like, we had imperialism, and then
Hmm.
now we have two sort of separate systems of what should have been two separate states, and
Hmm.
and one part is I guess infiltrating,
Hmm.
and I mean, to be frank, I think the only sort of inner imperialism that technically happened in Africa was with Ethiopia, where it
Hmm.
like colonized, or am I tripping?
They were not. Yeah, the
No, no,
Italians
no,
didn't
colonizing,
colonize.
colonizing Eritrea.
Oh yeah, yeah, okay.
If I'm,
But
if
that's
I'm
what's
not,
happening now. But that's what the French part is trying to do. If you're trying to eradicate the cultures of one people,
mm,
right? You start with your courts. Take
mm,
for example, there was one time in history where French was spoken in the British courts
mm,
because the King of England came from France. Because
mm,
originally Normandy and Burgundy, and then the
mm,
French guy came and they were speaking French. The British were just, oh, their cultures were almost wiped out and replaced by French culture.
mm,
So, if, for example, in Cameroon, we have one part that is over influencing the other part and trying to control its major resources,
mm,
and it's a very parasitic relationship where it's just absorbing all what the other person has,
mm.
and as opposed to like a symbiotic relationship where you're contributing, you see.
Um,
So from that point of view, we have like internal colonialism because it's
mm.
supposed to be one country, but this part
Well,
wants to
I
bully
don't.
the other
That
part.
see, that's where it differs. It's not supposed to be one country. I think that's
Okay.
where, like, if
Mm-hmm.
that's that. So I think your take is based on how you view the country, how you view the country as it's supposed to be. Um, I honestly don't have a specific answer for you in that realm.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I can say is that historically,
Mm-hmm.
Anglophone Cameroon and Francophone Cameroon were two different things, two different
Mm-hmm.
governing bodies that had the potential to be very separate things, separate entities,
Mm-hmm.
and then just rule themselves. But I feel like the problem even lies with the fact that we identify ourselves by our imperial masters.
Yeah, that's one problem. That's the external
Francophone.
part.
Yeah,
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 you
but like
see,
even it,
that's
no,
the
but it
external
but
part.
it affects internal policy too, because like the French have this assimilation policy, like assimilate by force policy, that they
Yeah.
are then trying to force on the other side, like
Mm-hmm.
the Anglophone part, where the British had a very sort of from afar type of policy. But I think if we're gonna just focus on the people, like the native Cameroonians themselves, and or even the Cameroon term is really stupid, but like
Exactly.
the native people that occupied and were supposed to be able to rule themselves. It's like it historically there were historically those were two entities
Mm-hmm.
that based on politics got rammed together, and now they're making the most of what they're making.
Mm-hmm.
I It is so complicated. Like if I
It
were
is.
like, it is so
It is.
at the end of the day, like, cause I always have this conversation with my father, because I'm always conflicted about whether or not to be on the side of, like, okay, so Cameroon is what it is. Let's just like find some way to work it out since it's already something,
Mm-hmm.
versus these are borders, obvious colonial borders that were made with no inherent care for the
Mm-hmm.
people that live within it. And so now it makes sense that people then want to rearrange themselves into what should have been, you know, what would have been a natural way, because like again with the West, like, you know, like hundreds of years of wars and rearranging like, you know, rearrangement of borders kind of created what they are today. And Africa never got that chance. But you know, does Africa have that time to be able to go through that and mold themselves in what they have to mold without all the outside influence? I don't think so. Not after
Yeah.
imperialism. So, you know, now
Yeah.
we identify ourselves, you know, Anglophone Cameroon, Francophone Cameroon, but then the problem becomes those people who are, you know, what is Anglophone Cameroon, had a history of ruling themselves outside of Francophone Cameroon. So do we give them that freedom, you know, to become whatever they want to become? And problem still remains, how do they then within those borders govern themselves? Are they governing themselves based on uh ancient colonial policies? You know, there's still going to be multinational corporations that are going to take advantage. There's still going to be heads of state that are going to take advantage of the
Yeah.
people. So, you know, the solution, there isn't, and I will say this, there isn't one singular solution for every single African state. um it just, it literally is based on the people that are there and what they want. And I feel like if we follow that, you know, that rule, that frame of reference, then I think a lot of good things can come. Ghana got themselves together. Um,
Mm-hmm.
my dad likes to point to Somaliland as being a very democratic,
Mm-hmm.
self-governing entity, even if they're not internationally recognized.
Yeah.
And he also likes to point to Swaziland. There are other examples. It's gonna take some time, but I feel like when you start, you know,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that that entity, that state serves the interest of the people, then you
Mm-hmm.
find some semblance of stability, and then, you know, people can live in peace and be able to have this symbiotic relationship, as you say, like a give and take. Like, you know, the government is
Yeah.
doing this for the people are
Mm-hmm.
doing this, and we're living with relatively long periods of stability and peace. I think that's the answer to that question is going to have to be very general, because if you get too specific, then it's like all these different fractions, and then it's just a lot. You
It
know,
will
it's a lot.
mix. It's like
It's way
it's
too
like
way too come.
eggplant. It's like a pot of eggplant with
One.
fish,
Oh,
crayfish. Like it should
crayfish
just be a mix.
mix
but
and
but
me.
anyway, you mentioned something about it being about the people and what
Mm,
they want. That could be actually the problem, because I'll tell you why.
mm,
Again, coming back to Franz Fanon,
mm,
in what he wrote, the book, Blackface White Mask,
mm.
he's actually saying that the black person sees himself through the eyes of the colonial master.
Yeah, so it's like
So
a.
in the end, they don't know what they want. What they want is actually what the colonial master wants, because you're seeing the world through the lens, through the eyes of that master.
Mm,
For example, if we say what the people want, they will probably be telling you they want what is in Hollywood movies or what is in French
okay.
movies. Like, you see what I mean? Like, and
Yeah,
that's
I see what you're
why even our politicians,
saying.
when they start when they start having budgets to like manage, they
Mm,
slice a piece and go
mm,
and see what is in France.
mm.
And then they come back and slice a bigger piece and go to Switzerland. So you see
Yeah.
that at the end of the day, they are just trying to get what they want, which is
Mm,
what has been given to them by the colonial
yeah.
master. So it's a
I mean,
very difficult problem,
it's a very.
actually.
I mean, I think that's where like being educated about your history comes into place. Because
Mm-hmm.
like those people who are educated about the history know the history of their place. Like obviously, there's certain things that from our past, or our past as Africans, that we're never gonna be able to recover. I feel
Yeah.
like some of us, like, and there's certain factions within African societies that have romanticized the past, because it's something that we're never gonna have a grasp on anymore. That was ruined by imperialism,
Yeah.
aka colonialism or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if people are educated about even just the history of their own people, like, you know, I am a product of an intertribal marriage. My dad
Oh, wow.
is my dad is Batibo. He's Guzang. My mom is from
Mm-hmm.
Babanki, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, I did, which is me and my siblings. There's no separation within that, and those people who just
Mm-hmm.
believe in pure, like, people like me, then
Mm-hmm.
pose a problem. But I think if you understand the history of
Mm-hmm.
just your peoples, in my case, the
Mm-hmm.
history of what was, we can start to come together on certain commonalities.
Mm-hmm.
certain commonalities, but also at the end of the day, like if people's basic human rights aren't being met, there's always gonna be a problem. Like
Yes.
I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to emulate certain Western forms of ways of life. I think it becomes problematic when it turns to like a self-hate thing,
Yeah.
like the French African trope.
Mm-hmm.
I'm francophone, like you're French over who you are or your identity as
Yeah.
a black. I think it becomes a problem when that wanting to
Mm-hmm.
assimilate or look like the other people then turns into just self-hate,
Yeah.
like not
True.
even loving who you are as a person as a core. But um I think which is what kind of the negative movement was, when it
Yes.
was like
Exactly.
when
Mm-hmm.
it was like, all right, we understand that our culture has been like ransacked by the French, and there's this forced assimilation, but what we're trying to recover is a bit of is what we are as Africans, as black people, and what the
Mm-hmm.
French culture was able to give together, and we've merged it into this new thing. And
Yeah.
there were obvious problems with it, but I think that idea
Mm-hmm.
is something that we have to deal with now, because that's the reality of now. We can't go back and just become pure without the touch of imperialism. And I honestly don't see anything wrong with meshing those two identities, as long as there's a
Mm-hmm.
consciousness, there's awareness about it, and as long
Yeah.
as people are at the end of the day appreciating the very core of who they are. um
Yeah.
and people's basic human needs are met, obviously. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
I think, and
Mm-hmm.
and also too, like the idea of pan-Africanism, then I think without people acknowledging their basic history, their history of who they are just here, and I
Mm-hmm.
think learning to like that, the idea of pan-Africanism to me is just dead to the core, you
I
know.
see. Yeah, I see. Well, one day, when I think of these issues, I I'm reminded of history,
Mm,
especially history as told by spiritual books, scriptures like in the
mm-hmm,
Bible, where you hear of Noah and the
mm,
whole world being destroyed,
mm,
or you hear of Gomorrah
mm.
and the whole city being destroyed. So I think maybe that would be the solution to a problem. Like
To
everything
destroy
is
everything, and
destroyed.
then
Yeah, and then there's a survive, start from
you know
scratch.
what? I think no, and to be honest, too, which
Mm-hmm.
is like to tie everything together. If this is like the last point or whatever, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's why you see certain overarching things were like abolish the police, like
Mm-hmm.
basically abolishing certain systems that have been placed that cannot function, so you can build
Okay.
something new. It's why
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a running joke, especially in a lot of like African circles, a lot of African politicians, how you know
Mm-hmm.
when regimes were being changed, and the the future of certain countries were being changed, they
Mm-hmm.
killed off all, like they had to kill off all those old historical figures, all those foreign politicians, to then make room to grow into something new. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's the basic idea of like
Mm-hmm.
revolutions.
Mm-hmm.
It literally is the basic idea of revolutions, that like you literally burn things and overturn things, and you build a new structure that's going to work for the people here and now, and
Okay.
hopefully the people in the future. So I think all of these things are tied together, um which is why I think my focus is on black liberation, regardless of what your borders are. um
Yeah.
and then
Mm-hmm.
dealing with the issues of black women within these various communities. It's why
Mm-hmm. I see.
intersectionalism is very, very important.
Yeah, I see. And concerning intersectionism, you had mentioned how the movement of womanism came about as
Mm,
because a couple of women, especially women of color and
mm,
black women, to be more specific,
mm,
realized that they were not included,
mm,
in like feminism.
mm,
But I came across this discussion actually somewhere where the argument was being made that feminism is like fashion. It's just
mm,
something that is in fashion now, and it's
mm,
not even an African thing.
mm,
It's like it's something that started in Europe and that came from Europe,
mm,
and this idea was traced back to the Bible,
mm,
uh, and then back to the European society. So if you let me just elaborate a little bit. So
mm,
the idea is that uh, European societies put emphasis on visual perception, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even from Christianity, the eyes are like the head of the, whatever they call it, the head of the body. And Christ even mentioned something about the eyes, right? So now they say that since the eyes are the top, the eyes at the top, it means that what you see matters.
Mm-hmm.
So now in Europe, those ancient societies or Middle East societies, when they saw like a woman, you just judge her that okay, a woman is weaker and whatever. But in Africa, we laid emphasis on auditory perception. So they'll prefer to listen to you before judging you. So that's why in Africa, before the Europeans came, we there was no idea of like a queen or king. You had
Mm-hmm.
words that were more like a leader. So when the Europeans came, and they would conquer, let's say, the society and ask, where is the king? And then they would say, no, this is our leader, this woman, for example. And
Mm-hmm.
then they would take her off and put a king there.
Mm-hmm.
You see? So, and there's this woman who is like a post-colonialism specialist called Oyewumi.
Mm-hmm.
She's a Nigerian. So
Mm-hmm.
she actually made the argument that feminism is not an African thing because there was no idea of a woman in the African society.
Mm-hmm.
So when you came to help and make decisions, people listen to what you have to say and they wouldn't look at you. So in that case, I guess the truths that lie within that idea are the ones that are helping for aspects of womanism to come to surface. If
I
that makes any
mean,
sense.
I think it made sense, but again, I'm gonna reiterate that like
Yeah,
things
yeah,
weren't
please go on.
things weren't like uniform across the board in Africa. Like I
Okay.
know Ashanti culture is
Mm-hmm.
maternal. Like it's obviously based on matriarchy, or
Mm-hmm.
is that even a word? But it's like based on it's like it comes from women. Women
Mm-hmm.
are kingmakers, but in other African societies, it's based on patriarchy. In that case,
Mm-hmm.
and it's indigenously based on not that the Europeans came and made it. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, as a woman, maybe from a matriarchal society, your
Mm-hmm.
view about feminism and the womanism might be different
Mm-hmm.
versus a woman from a patriarchal society. Your views on feminism and womanism are completely different.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I can say to that,
Mm-hmm.
and again, things are also based on who your imperial masters were. If you were colonized by the British tended to use the systems in place there. So it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like they would come and just knock down. It was like, okay, if you already have a functioning system, we'll use it. So if you're a patriarchal society, they're gonna use the king. Maybe it might not be called king, but they'll use the ruler there, and then you just
Mm-hmm.
are what you are. And again, these are things that are very indigenous to Africa. That's not like somebody made it up. And I also think historically, anciently, it's been men that have
Mm-hmm.
been the kings. Like, Mansa was, and maybe I'm tripping. Like, maybe I'm tripping, but Mansa, a lot of
Maybe.
historical figures that I learned of, I
Mm-hmm.
gotta be honest, a lot of historical figures and maybe that's again, those are societies that are based on patriarchy, are
Mm-hmm.
men, and in the direct translation of whatever language they are, their titles translated to king. This was
Yeah, I see. Mm-hmm.
pre-colonial impact. And so that argument probably would only work within certain systems within Africa. I think the only thing I can say for womanism is you know it's against is the emphasis on the complete liberation of women, that is
Mm-hmm.
politically, socially, sexually,
Mm-hmm.
financially, is the emphasis on liberating women completely, just to be, so that there's equity between men and women in that society. But I also
Mm-hmm.
think like it would be intellectually dishonest to say that it isn't a thing, or it isn't, especially with the way African societies are set up today. Like, today,
Mm-hmm.
like I think it would be
Mm-hmm.
intellectually dishonest to kind of like, you know carve that out as something that is being inherently African, especially with the way society is set today, especially with the way
Mm-hmm.
women are still not represented accurately on various levels, unless
Yeah.
that unless that's inherently, like
Mm-hmm.
inherently major part of the
Yeah.
major of society. So
mhm.
I
Yeah.
think there are holes to that argument is what I'm
Yeah,
basically saying. The different.
yeah, I get it. I get it. It's not an argument to undermine women. It's an
Mm-hmm,
argument, like you always say, and a lot of thinkers who say that to solve your problems, go back to history, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's just one of those observations that are trying to tell you that go back to history,
Go
but
back to him.
but they're
Mm-hmm,
giving you an example by
mm-hmm,
saying that before there was no idea of woman in the sense that we didn't separate the societies like that, because when
mm-hmm,
you start looking at it, the binary system, male, female, then that whole aspect of being very visually inclined comes in, creeps in.
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm,
if you're having like an auditory a society that is heavy on auditory perception, then they want to listen to someone. So whether
mm-hmm,
you're male or female, what you say matters. So
mm-hmm,
in that case, they wouldn't say woman, woman,
mm-hmm,
man, man. You see what I
mm-hmm.
mean? So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that was the observation, like
That's
trying
what
to
I'm
take
saying.
people back to that kind of history.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But also, like, I mean, just like a question, something that's like trending in my
yeah.
mind. I
Uh-huh.
think African history. There's a lot of like we have a lot of our history has a lot of like auditor, like is heavily based on certain parts of it has
Exactly.
art,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
also like what you have to understand is like within society
Mm-hmm.
there were definitely distinctions between men and women based on
Yes.
clothing itself, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So like there was
Yes.
obviously that perception of like separation
Yes.
because of the
That.
way
Yeah.
people presented
Mm-hmm.
themselves, the way people dressed, and just
Mm-hmm.
in general customs that were um customs that were like gender roles.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
get
did
that. Yeah.
obviously gender roles where it's like if you're a man in society, the way our society is set up, as a
Mm-hmm.
man, this is the role that you fit into, and as a woman, this is the role that you fit. Not to say that no, based on those roles, they were then like subjected to bad
Mm-hmm.
treatment. I think that's where maybe that perspective
Oh
comes
yeah.
in. But like
Yeah.
there was obviously sort of a separation, and some societies took it a different way, and others took it a different way. I
Yeah.
think is where.
Yeah, and to chime in on that again, those societies looked at men and women mostly from a biological point of
Mm,
view. So
okay.
even if you're distributing responsibility is to those that really adapt to you, who you are, what you are biologically, as opposed to some kind of social structure that
Mm,
you just need to look at and then make decisions.
right, right, right.
Yeah, because if you go back to again, I would say the ancient Greeks, and I'm saying that because their civilization is closest to Egyptian civilization. So
Mhm.
if I say that it's something that hits home, it's close to
Mm,
home to us as Black people. So I would say they mostly copied what we did, and
mhm.
maybe they kind of fixed whatever they could fix.
Mhm.
So yeah, so in that society, uh, you had two important. Before I said politics was the greatest art, but
Mm,
economics was the politics for the family.
mm,
So you have politics to be for the state, and then economics was the politics for a family.
mm,
So when they were looking at economics, they were saying that uh, men and women have opposite natures. Like women are kind of gentler, softer, and then
mm,
even like physically, and then the man is like harsh, strong. Majority, I'm not saying that's absolute,
mm,
and they were made opposite in the sense that one we have a lot of courage and then one will have less courage, and the
mm,
reason is because of the golden mean. You've probably heard of the golden mean, that the best thing is to meet in the middle.
mm,
So the woman will be there to calm down this, because too much courage is like foolishness. So
mm,
if the man is too courageous, he'll probably want to go fight the lion, but
mm,
the woman will be able to calm him down. And if the woman too is like, she lacks courage to do something, the man can also team up with her, so they'll meet
mm,
in the middle. Yeah, so those societies always created this structure where you have division of labor,
mm,
where the woman will do what she's most inclined at doing biologically, and then the man too. But then as history went on, maybe we muddied the waters of that setup, and then we have all this mess that we're in today.
I
But I
mean,
hope.
I'm sorry. The
Yeah,
only thing
sorry,
I,
I'm
is like
listening.
obviously like Chinua Achebe's things fall apart,
Hmm.
and I think that same concept of like there's a balance between a man and a woman. And again, I'm probably looking at this through a womanist lens, and so you have to forgive me or not
Oh,
for
go
that
on.
take.
Forgive me too for
But
looking at it
but
as
like
a.
but like that
Hmm.
same concept of like there's a division
Hmm.
biologically between men and women, therefore men and women have what amounts to gender roles, basically. Gender roles is what I look at them as, because if you're like this
Okay.
separation and then you do that, those are gender roles. And then also I think he was trying to put across this idea that like there's gonna be a balance of the genders, that like men are more inclined to do as women, and then there will be sort of like a meeting between the
Hmm.
two to like have a nice balance. But the reality of it, and this was
Hmm.
before the colonizers came. um when you
Hmm.
examine the life and
Hmm.
some of the customs of the society, which
Hmm.
is I think that book talks specifically about Igbo culture and society.
Hmm.
You find out that whole notion of like gender balancing act was just woefully wrong, and that like obviously within that society it was the
Yeah.
men that were benefiting the most, and women were subjected to certain things that if they had the opportunity they would obviously change. So
Yeah, I see. Well, I mean, about these roles, let's look at one topic. Look at polygamy, and
mm,
the other one where I don't know how to call it. Is it polyandry, where a woman could have multiple husbands?
I'm not familiar with that because that is nothing where I'm from. So
So imagine that we want to say, okay, let's make everything equal for the
mm,
all the genders. Okay, now you say I stand up in the council meeting. Like I stand up and say, I want to say that men and women are equal. So a woman can also marry like five husbands at
mm,
once, like the
mm,
same way that a man can marry five
mm.
women. So now one man can impregnate. I hope I don't start causing trouble here. The one
You
man
will,
can.
because you're about to say some BS. That's the same argument that always comes up when it's this topic. I'm like, okay,
Yes,
okay.
yes. Please enlighten me. So you say that one man can impregnate like two women at once, right?
Mm.
But it's hard for like one woman to be impregnated by three or four husbands at the same time.
I
You
think,
see, so if we are trying to like look at a society where we can be forward thinking, you
mm,
see that, yeah, and it's just like one to many mapping. Even in those with the data sciences, you see that there's some things that one to many mapping would just fit in naturally as opposed to that. So just
I
put that out there for this argument.
for the argument, but I think what's natural to you as a man isn't necessarily natural to me as a woman. And I
Yes,
think
yes,
those
true.
perspectives have to, but like I think even with that idea, it's rooted in this idea that women are here for reproduction. Like that, because like even like the argument about polygamy is for
Mm-hmm.
reproduction. Like one man has multiple wives so he can have multiple children. And I
Mm-hmm.
think some of these things are just rooted in the notion that like a woman's number one job or goal into this world is to reproduce, like to to give birth.
Mm-hmm.
Just what I mean. And
Yeah,
when it's if obviously we know the biological differences
yeah, that's.
of man versus woman, where it's like, okay, if it's a woman with multiple husbands she can only have one at a time, but
Mm-hmm.
she
Yeah,
understands
the
that
man.
and they do too. And so
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a viable argument necessarily in this case, because with
Yeah, that's.
every they understand. And so it's kind of like goes back to this thing where it's like, as a woman job is to reproduce, and if you can't do that in the most effective way possible, then that's
Mm-hmm.
deemed like not
Yeah, I
not
see.
necessarily to the
I
main
see.
cause, you know what I mean? Yeah. So
Yeah, I see. But on that, I think it's almost a similar issue we face when we look at the Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter um, issue. In the sense that like ignorance just makes us look at the right thing at the wrong time, or look at the right thing the wrong way.
mm,
If you look at the evolution, for example, you see survival of the fittest. Um, and natural selection, those things explain the essence of being human and the essence of even our cosmos, right?
Mm,
So, and at the core of that, ideas like reproduction plays central roles. So, if you are tasked, by task, I don't want to make it too simplistic, but if you are tasked, or if you are primarily equipped to handle the reproductive aspects of the system, and I mean there is no other role as important. So even if we look at women as playing the role for reproduction, that is the greatest thing that can be done. But the only harm we'll be doing is looking at it with a lot of ignorance and trying to degrade it.
mm,
Because what other role? Look at a little baby. Like, from what I learned, um, when a woman is pregnant, the baby grows in her, and then you inherit. Normally, the father's genes will come in, but the first breast milk the baby receives from the mother, like, and sparks up growth for the immune system and all of those. You mostly inherit those from your mother. So
mhm.
if you look at all of the reproduction, it's one of the most, like, it's divine. It's actually something divine. But when we look at it with a lot of ignorance, and we start rubbing it with mud, just like a pig would take like a golden ring and play with it in the mud. You see what I mean? So at the end of the day, it comes back to education too. Once we understand the real meanings of these things, then women will be able to hear arguments like, yes, maybe your reproduction is one thing you handle, and they can take that argument and show the people that you're actually ignorant if you think it's something degrading.
It's not something degrading, but
Yes.
for people to
Mhm.
thrust it on women as if it's something that they have to do is the
Oh, I
problem.
see.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Hmm.
and also personally too, as a woman, if I don't want my life defining moment to be the moment I have kids, it doesn't have to be. You know,
Yeah.
I,
Hmm.
and it's
True.
something that it's something because it's like it's something that people qualify as a woman's strength, and it's
Hmm.
like nothing else that she can do will ever come close. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like those notions then become very personal, because it's like, if you feel like,
Yeah.
if I
True.
personally feel like me giving birth to another human is the greatest thing I can do, it's mine. But to say that is the greatest thing
Hmm.
that's like billions of women all over the world can do, then it's like,
Hmm.
really, no. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and I just I really have to push back against that, because again, not every woman wants to give birth. And so
Hmm.
if you are quan qualifying women based on giving birth, then and a woman cannot give birth, or woman doesn't want to give birth, then that means that you've automatically placed her, or made her, placed her as inferior. If that's
Hmm.
the like, if that's what you're using as a level
Yeah.
to
Right.
gauge, you know what I
Exactly.
mean? So if you
Yeah.
use
Exactly.
that as a level to gauge a woman and the accomplishments, those who are outside of that are automatically inferior, or
Exactly.
those who can't
Yeah.
have it, and then when you start getting to the nitty gritty, like, if a woman can't do it naturally, then that makes her inferior. A woman has to go through this, then that makes her inferior. So then that's a non-starter in terms of the argument. That's a definitely non-starter for me.
Hmm.
Different culture, even within like a cultural, it's like, I just, that's not something that I really look at, because every woman is just so different, and to quantify women for this one thing is to disregard every other woman that has freedom of choice, or just wants to do something else, or just
Yeah.
can't. So
Yeah. Yeah. Ignorance. I mean, ignorance is gonna just melt us all. so, but anyway, even about birth, right? Uh, Even in the intellectual circles, like, birth is also used as an analogy for invention, right?
Mm,
So in that light, then I would just like to season this chat with uh, one
mhm,
thing that was done by a woman, Ada Lovelace. I don't know if you've heard of Ada Lovelace. Yeah, she was the daughter of Lord Byron, who was a famous poet back in
mm,
England.
mm,
I forgot. I think, is it the 16th century, something like that. But she worked hand in gloves with Babbage, Charles Babbage.
mm,
So Charles Babbage created computers. Let me say, created computers. He was one of those trying to create computers. So he was trying to create a a machine. What am I saying? Mechanical machine. He was
mhm.
trying to create a machine that does calculations. So you make it in a way that it could do addition and subtraction using ideas from the abacus, which was a more primitive device. So, but when Ada Lovelace was assisting him, but when she looked at the work and looked at how things were, she made a statement that is actually the bedrock and the foundation for our civilization. She realized that although this machine is made to deal with numbers, it means that it can deal with every other thing. That means that so long as you can take something else and convert it to numbers, then you could add them, subtract them, and convert them back to that thing. And if you look at today, I'm talking to you now. Whatever I'm saying is audio, right? And then my video, it will be taken by this computer, right? Converted into ones and zeros, encoded, manipulated, shipped over to your computer, and then your computer will take back the ones and zeros, convert them back into these videos, which is what she was saying. You see, that's what she was saying. And the same thing happens with colors, it happens with music, it happens with everything that can happen in the computer. That simple idea that she said so poetically. And that was a woman. You see, so anyway, I just wanted to put that out there.
I mean, shout out to women. That's
shout out to you, woman. Yeah. So one of the thing I know, if you want to chat, from what I'm seeing, we could chat until tomorrow. So yeah, but one of the thing that we would just talk on a little bit, so that we can save some of the discussion, especially juicier discussions for later, is this podcast. Like, why did you start a podcast? And tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Oh my God! So, like, the premise of the podcast, basically, if you were able to ever look at the podcast,
I started listening, and I'll keep listening to them.
Yeah. Okay, shout out to new viewership. But the podcast, if you look at the description, it says that Lala and I were two Cameroonian American women that are very vehement about, identifying our identities and using that to liberate, using those identities, examining those identities to liberate, women all over the world. It basically started with us calling out, men and women alike, and certain certain behaviors within our Cameroonian community that we saw, that we grown up in. If people have been following us from the very beginning, we started talking, and we started Uncle Stop Touching. It was basically sexual assault. That is very prevalent within our community, and we started out by calling out the uncles, defining uncles in that context as men who use their positions of power to prey on women and young girls. Uncles in that context were men who had no respect for women, and just kept being propped up within the society that allows men to have, disregard women, mind, body, and soul, everything. And so, we were calling out bad behaviors. I mean, more than a bad behavior, but it's just like a subculture within our culture that that's just there. And men and women, like, because we call it the next article, then we call that aunties, as being, the vanguards of this bad behavior from uncles, and not calling out their husband, their sons, other people that are, continuously perpetuating this sort of behavior. And so we started out by, taking on that topic, and there was a lot of feedback, a lot of pushback, especially from the Cameroon community. Oh, uncles, you guys are disregarding the uncles that are doing good in the community, And we were just like, we're two women that have experienced a lot of shit at the hands of uncles within our community. And, even from the feedback of other women that are able to, unfortunately, relate to the stories we're telling, that's a problem. And, if we're going to tie it into today, it's like, when Black women talk about their sexual assault at the hands of men, Black men, in most cases. It's
Mhm.
like then we're being gaslighted to say that we all of a sudden hate men, when the reality
Yeah.
is that we don't. We're just calling
Mhm.
out the behavior that has become part of a culture, which is just stupid and just woefully wrong. And we
Mhm.
also call out the women. They're women that are protecting sexual predators. They're women that are protecting potential sexual predators, and they're women, that are raising sexual
Mhm.
predators. And then you raise your girls to be complicit. You raise a women to sit down. You raise women to be strong, to take the abuse and not say anything. And then when you see two women that are speaking
Mhm.
out about it, all of a sudden it becomes a problem. So that was,
A black leg.
yeah.
Sorry, a black leg. I said a black leg.
Oh
Whatever
my,
that means.
oh my god. No. But that was what it was. And then it grew into something where we were like, let's continue to just and chat about these experiences. And it became something where it's like, as two women that consider themselves to be feminist womanists, about
Mm.
the liberation of women, black women, we're
Mhm.
like, let's continue to tackle specific issues that deal with this topic, because we definitely want to weed it out. And like I said, if you want something to change, you have to start locally. We have to weed it out
Yeah.
within our groups.
Mhm.
Something that we're very vehement about speaking about within. And then like other women from other cultures have reached out to us and been like, I'm going through this too. And then start a greater
Mhm.
movement to weed it out. That is part of liberation for women.
Oh
Like,
wow. Mhm.
like weeding
Mhm.
that sort of bad behavior, teaching men differently, like education. That's where it comes in, like educating men, differently, so that men don't grow up and feel like you're entitled to a woman's body. And then also educating women so that they don't grow up and feel like they just have to sit down and take everything. you
Yeah,
know
true.
and
Yeah, I
that's very
see.
critical. So that,
Mhm.
on a personal basis, that's what we're doing, that's what we're trying to establish. And we're a long ways from it, but everything that we put out is towards this goal of liberating women by educating people about certain things, calling out certain behaviors, and just educating ourselves as well, becoming more aware.
Yeah, oh
So,
wow, that's very courageous actually. And from what you told me, I was just reminded of Sir Isaac Newton's third law, that every action has an equal but opposite reaction.
right.
So that was actually, I could say that I was enlightened while listening to that, because
Mm,
there were times when I've also tried to bring change
mm,
in my own life, and then I
mm,
stand in my own way.
mm,
Like like I
mm,
could decide that I want to start working out, I
mm.
want to
Yeah.
wake up early. Then the same me who is trying to wake up is the same me that is snoozing the alarm.
Mm,
You see what I mean? So
mm,
that action that I'm trying to do by moving forward, the same me is trying to stop it equally by snoozing the alarm. So
mm,
if I can do that to myself, then how about people who may be selfish, or other people who are very different from me? It means if I
mm.
start an endeavor to do it often, so that law is like a very powerful law. So thanks for telling me a story, because that's
Thank
what it like.
Yeah, thank you
That's
for
what it meant.
thank you for having me on. Like, I mean, our podcast, you guys,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's my banya. If you're
Mm-hmm.
Cameroonian, you know that banya. So this is actually a funny story. If you haven't watched, or like the very first episode, it's kind of like, it might sound like a contradiction, especially after we talked about polygamy. But
Mm-hmm.
banya in Cameroonian culture is basically a co-wife.
Yes.
It's a co-wife. And Lala,
Mm-hmm.
when we were writing, the stories, and like we were, um like, how do you call it, like coming together, like be able to relate to some of the things that we went through growing up as Cameroon American in
Mm-hmm.
our different societies. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
similarities. Lala started calling me her banya, because like,
Mm.
banya banya is co-wife.
Yes, right. Uh,
But the definition, or banya in this context, is
mm.
we're married to the cause.
Oh,
We're
I
married
see.
to the cause. So we're two women that are married to the same cause.
Yeah, I
And
see.
so in turn,
Wow.
we are co-wives. We're banyas to this cause. And like, I was like, damn, that's so profound. Like, let's put that shit in there.
Yeah, I
But
see. I
that
see.
that was the point. We're married to the same cause. So banyas to
Hmm.
this cause is this cause of a black liberation of women. So that was really dope.
Oh, and that's pretty smart actually, to take that idea and kind of, it's
Turn
very
it on its
poetic. Yeah, you tell it, it's actually the truth. It's very true actually, and it takes like, um great skill to do
Mm,
that. Yeah.
mm.
So thank you very much, Nara. Do you have anything to say, like to anyone listen to you? If you want to
I
like pump them up to
pump
like,
them up.
yeah. So
Um,
what are you gonna say?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me on. Like I
Thank you
was just
too.
like an open-ended conversation. I was like, that's not my comfort zone because I like to prepare morning,
Mhm.
have a structure. We would have been back and forth a couple of times preparing things, making sure I don't say nothing stupid. You're not up to nothing stupid, but I like the organic conversations. It's always nice to have some of that, and
Mhm.
to be able to share that with the world. I think
Mhm.
the only thing that I can say in light of my experiences through life and what's going on right now is like something that I keep
Mhm.
reciprocating, and I say this specifically to black men, is that like protect black women, protect
Mhm.
black girls, protect trans women, just in general protect black women, because as somebody who's gone through certain things, seen other women go through certain things, seeing women go through things, I feel like I started out saying that I feel like black women are the most disrespected or
Mhm.
underappreciated people in society, and it's like it's something that I'm going through, and it's something I hope my black daughters don't have to go through. But
Mhm.
while we're getting there, like I really need to see what somebody asking me, like we had a panel,
Mhm.
and I was like, what do black women want from black men? We want that protection, like
Okay.
protect black women, protect black girls, protect young girls, protect
Mhm.
trans black women, because again, like they're being killed just for being who they are. So if anything,
Mhm.
protect them the same way black women protect black men. And that,
Okay.
if anything, that's the only thing I gotta say to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, Nora. Like I leave this conversation knowing that I've absorbed a lot from you, and
Likewise,
yeah,
likewise.
yeah. So it's changed me in ways that I have the rest of my life to like experience. So
That's
thank you very
dope.
much, and
Thank
I
you.
hope that we have many of these chats. Inshallah. Yeah,
Inshallah, inshallah.
yeah, yeah. So have a good one. Bye. Have a good one.
Thank you.